Welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where in every episode we explore what is research culture and what should it be. You'll hear thoughts and opinions from a range of contributors to help you change research culture into what you want it to be.
Hello, I'm Ruth Winden, the Careers with Research Consultant at the University of Leeds. I've been looking forward to today's conversation for a while. My guest is Claire Brocke, Professor for Biomechanics at the University of Sheffield. Claire suggested a topic that is close to her heart and that I think deserves more attention in academia. It's all about being a research leader and staying true to oneself. Welcome, Claire. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on combining the personal and the professional as an academic. And I can't think of a better person to have this conversation with than you. And you have so many wonderful lessons and stories to share. And before we go into stories, do you want to give us an insight into your career so far, Claire?
Hey, thank you, Ruth. Yes, I'm now a professor of biomechanics at the University of Sheffield, and I've been here nearly 2 years. But I'm going to take you back to the early stages of my career. So straight from school, I didn't feel like I was particularly academic, which is somewhat ironic. So I was a cardiac technician at Bedford Hospital. So this gave me lots of experience of working with patients. But the thing that I found frustrating there was I wasn't really getting much beyond doing the testing. So I wasn't sort of asking scientific questions or sort of following through in terms of the diagnosis. So I identified medical engineering as a potential career. I looked at different universities and ended up at the University of Bradford to do a medical engineering undergrad. And part of the reason I did this was I thought back in the day, so I was only sort of 20, that I was going to go back into cardiovascular. So I'd been in surgery and seen pacemakers and heart valves and things and thought that's where I was going. But a placement at Depew whilst I was doing my undergrad twisted me along to orthopedics. I really enjoyed my time on placement, and that made a big impact on me in terms of research. So then I took on a PhD, which I started at Bradford, but moved across with Professor Jin when he moved to Leeds. PhD was interesting because I'd got this stereotypical one person sitting in the corner, never talking to anybody else, white coat kind of thing, and thought, oh, that's not for me, but discovered it's very much about teams and collaboration. So then I somewhat took root in Leeds. So I had a couple of postdocs. One was looking at hip replacement, and then the next one was looking at knee replacement and wear and performance of devices. At that point, I decided that I quite liked academia. So as a postdoc, I actively approached some of the academics to get some teaching experience. So from midway through my first postdoc, I was involved in project supervision and then got to teach and lecture on some modules, which again take me back to when I was about 14 and doing speeches for English. I had to do them from the back of the room because I was so nervous and didn't like people looking at me. So I think all of the teachers that knew me back then wouldn't for a moment suspect that this was the career I would end up with. So then in about 2012, we had some funding through the Leeds National Institute for Health Research Biomedical Research Centre, which enabled me to have effectively a university fellowship, which put me on the course that I'm still on today in terms of doing research in the foot and ankle. And at some point along the way, I couldn't tell you when, I also became involved in the Centre for Doctoral Training, which was sort of supporting the development of about 50 PhD students. And then my senior colleague Joanne left. So in, I think, 2018, I picked up the director role for the CDT and then carried that on through till 2022. One of the things I discovered about myself during that time was how much I appreciated developing people and how rewarding it was to see people progress. So up until then, I think I'd been very research outcome focused. And after or as a result of that, I think things became a bit more person focused. obviously we had COVID, dare I mention it, but that sort of led me to become the director for postgraduate research in Leeds, because I was able to have pretty difficult conversations with senior academics and the senior management around how PhDs were being looked after during COVID, because obviously it was a very challenging time for everyone. I got this opportunity to apply for a job in Sheffield, and wasn't initially sure whether I was up to it. I don't think it wasn't that I wasn't interested, but I wasn't sure that I had the profile that would enable me to get it. So had some conversations and some support from other people in terms of going for that. And then I have been here for nearly 2 years. Research is going well. Teaching is going extremely well, and I've just become the director for postgraduate research for our school here as well, because it's something that's really important to me.
Wow, that is absolutely fantastic. What a career. And I love, Claire, that you're so open about the challenges, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But for transparency, I know Claire so well because not only was I an external to the university at the time, you were my client, because I had developed the career transitions program for the cohort of the PhDs. And I remember when I was an external, I started it and I loved working with them. What really struck me was that all the they were so value driven, and they were so keen. I'm doing this because I really want to improve the lives of patients. I had a very, very clear objective with it. And Joanna went to Australia, and then you took over. And what really struck me was, and I still hear this because I'm still in touch with some people, because some of them, finished 2 years ago, and are still in touch with me and give me updates on how their career is progressing. And it's so interesting. Every time we talk, your name comes up immediately, and their eyes light up, and they say, Claire was just wonderful because she was really so supportive of all the PhDs. And you had many, many PhDs, not just supervision, but also as part of the program. And so getting this incredibly strong positive feedback from your community and seeing them now, we follow them on LinkedIn, and we see them thrive, that must give you immense pride. But I also remember during COVID, it was a lot to carry, wasn't it? Because everyone was looking at you, the PhDs, they knew you always were supportive. So who do they run to when they have issues? They run to Claire.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's genuinely incredible to see the successes that our PhD students have become, just thinking about sort of, particularly for our CGT, because it was in sort of the medical engineering space. So we were taking biologists, physicists, chemists, and engineers, and then sort of changing their directions in some cases, that they were coming in as a biologist but leaving to go on to sort of more of a medical engineering profession. And I think that inherently encouraged the students to trust me, because they were vulnerable going into a situation where they weren't comfortable with, learning things that they didn't know. And I think one of the key things for me was actually to be a reassuring presence, because it was recognizing things are hard. I think one of the challenges transitioning from sort of a degree to a PhD is just that self-awareness and learning about yourself. And you may have come off the back of an undergraduate degree with a first-class degree, but then turning that into delivering a PhD takes some effort and is hard work. But COVID was terrible, let's face it. So we had some different challenges. So obviously initially we all knew as little as anybody else. So students were going, what do I do? And I was like, I have no idea. I don't know when the university is going to open or how things are going to work. But later on, when we kind of knew where we stood a little bit more, there were challenges also in terms of the PhD researchers had been receiving their stipend. Were they going to get more money? Were they going to get extensions? There were challenges in getting back to the labs and all those kind of things in terms of restrictions. So there was a lot to deal with. And again, I think my biggest role was, well, two things. One was organisational and asking questions on behalf of people, because sadly, an academic member of staff asking a question perhaps has a bit more clout than a PhD student asking sometimes, or certainly perhaps the student doesn't have the confidence to do that. But secondly, I think it was just the pastoral role in terms of being there, understanding that it was stressful, just giving students the opportunity to vent as well. I think quite often I would be, well, there's nothing practical I can do, but I understand that you need to talk this through, or moan, or tell me that the situation is terrible. And we had lots of very constructive conversations in that space. And just to maintain the community as well, because we've gone from having like a shared office for our PhD researchers, because the whole idea is building the cohort, to them all scattered across the city, not having contact. And I think that was a really important aspect to keep going as
The
well.
isolation. And I think what struck me was, you created that really safe space for people.
Mhm.
And because everyone said, oh, Claire's on our side. And that kind of been easy always either, because also, you have certain expectations, and you had your own pressures, doing your research at the same time. But, having that transparency with the PhDs. So for me, that's was also interesting working with you, because I remember when I then became an intern at the university, and I negotiated my role at the university. Believe it or not, Claire, but my continuation with your program was I think the third piece on my negotiation list, because I felt like, I'd seen through 6 years of that
Mhm.
cohort, and there were 2 years left, and I said it's really important to me, that I continue, because it was a wonderful opportunity also to build up such a great community, and also, finish off what we had started together. And I always find it so interesting the way you approach things with the PhDs, because you were very clear in your expectations, but you always were fantastic, advocate and listener. And I think people really also see you as a role model, because you can see some of them went down the academic route, some of them went into industry, some of them did a complete career change. And it's really fascinating what
Mhm.
these 150 people have done with their lives. But I thought it was amazing to see how you modeled, aside of academics that we might not see as much in terms of, the personal development side. And because that often is in not necessarily behind closed doors, but it's not as open as having those conversations and standing in front of people and saying, this is really important, this is your career development, is you're lucky to get this time with a career consultant for 6 months, make the most of it. So these really clear messages to people, making clear what your expectations are and what the opportunities are. I thought that was fascinating. And so what fascinates me about your proposed topic for today, the becoming the academic leader, it's already very clear, how much that means to you. And there is something that I find so interesting about the second part, is staying true to yourself, because that implies that there is a chance that you might not do that if you're not careful. What do you mean by the staying true to yourself as an academic leader?
So I think academia is changing quite quickly at the moment in terms of obviously the landscape with regards to funding. I guess the relationship with academia and general society is changing, but I think also sort of the models that we've got. So when I was starting my PhD, the professors were what you might stereotypically think of as a professor. And I will come back to qualify that in a bit. But they were not in ivory towers, but were very almost inaccessible. So you felt bad for taking up their time. You knew that they were doing all this amazing research. Maybe I'm not doing amazing research. Maybe that's different. But no, sorry, I'm being flippant. Um, the relationship was different in as much as when I was working with my PhD supervisors, who were amazing academics and amazing people, I was really mindful that I was taking up their time. And I'm really careful that people I work with know that my time is theirs. And I think the other thing is I think my dad would occasionally call me soft. Um, and I think that's a really positive thing, that I will listen to people's worries. I will pay attention to how people are feeling. And I think academia, particularly engineering academia, has historically been fairly formal, constrained. you get on with your research, and then you excel in your research. And I think for me, my career goes alongside my life, and occasionally things happen that mean they crash into each other. And that's something that's really important to me in terms of how I work with other people, is recognizing that they have lives and they don't turn up at 8:39, become a researcher for however many hours, and then leave and get on with being themselves again. So I think for me, the sort of authentic side is just sitting comfortably with your own values and your own priorities. And it's probably taken me, I guess, when I was taking part in the CDT, to really think about what my values were, and also become comfortable in my own skin. I think I spent early stages of my academic career trying to be someone else, trying to fit the model of being super organized and super shiny and just perfect in all directions. And then you kind of realize that no one's like that. And actually, what I've recognized in the last couple of years is enabling people to see that I'm not perfect, and that I have anxieties about things, or things stress me out, actually helps other people. Because initially I thought I'm supposed to be this like serene swan that
Mm.
everyone looks up to me as a leader and goes, that's the way to do it. Look, nothing stresses her out. She's the epitome of calm. And to be fair, most of the time I am calm. But I realized that actually part of my hesitancy to really commit to academia and think of myself as a leader was feeling like I couldn't be myself, and that that was wrong. And I
Mm.
thought, well, actually, if I'm feeling that, then there will be people that are following me that I'm doing no favors to if I try and dress myself up as someone different. And so I've been really open with sort of how I am. Like you said, I think academia understandably encourages excellence, which then makes us tend to focus on the negatives because we're trying to get rid of those. And then that can make for a really hard life if you're never getting positive feedback. So
Mm.
I like to recognize that actually sometimes it isn't about the research output, but it's about what the other success is. So for me, my probably my biggest success in my career is not research related at all. It's some of the students that have maybe started a final year project with me, shy, maybe a little bit lacking in confidence, maybe not performing as well as they could be. And by the end of it, delivering a project they're proud of, that they're excited by, that they're enthused by. Um, and so my research is incredibly important to me, but those kind of things where someone's sort of gone on a pathway and come out happier, more confident, is really just the best thing I think about
Mm.
academia.
It's priceless, isn't it? And I think
Yeah.
what strikes me is, and that's what the PhD say about you, is Claire cares. And I think we need more of that in academia because, we love the research and we love the teaching and we love the excellence. And I'm a big believer in, if we can create an environment where people feel safe and they can be themselves, because then they're in a better position to actually make the contribution that they're really capable of.
Hmm.
And what strikes me also about you, Claire, is you're so value driven, and it resonates with me because for me, one of the least values you'll be familiar with is compassion, and I totally support that value because at the end of the day, yes, we're here to do extremely high level, complicated problem solving. But at the end of the day, we're human beings
Mm.
with needs, and we're the better for it if we pay attention to this human side of academia. And people notice it. It's really interesting because I get the same feedback. Oh, Ruth, you care, and I always think, why do they say that? And I think people actually feel it because when we're authentic, and took me a long time as well, Claire, in my profession. I always looked up at these role models. If I could only be like so and so, and it took me at least 2 decades to realize, you know what, I am full of flaws, but I also have a lot to offer, and that's okay. And I have a specific style. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Again, I can live with that, but for those it works, I can help them achieve great success, in whatever way success, what that means to them. And so I felt a bit like when we worked together so closely, I felt like you were a kindred spirit. Because, I come from Germany, and Germany is very, academia still is to this day. It is extremely hierarchical,
Mhm.
and I worked at the university, so I was a student, and I also worked there as a member in the department, and it I could never be myself because I always had to watch it, because I felt like,
Yes,
I'm not being accepted the way I am, and that hurts, and I think creating that welcoming atmosphere where people are like, yeah, I can be myself. And the diversity is beautiful, isn't it? Because we all bring different
absolutely.
things to the workplace.
Definitely. I think recognizing individuals as unique. Um, so I've now supervised, I think, co-supervised or supervised 24 students to completion.
Wow.
And the range of, even just from a subject area, what they came in with versus what they've gone on to do, and some of my PhD researchers are doing amazingly incredible stuff. Um, but also the life experiences. So I had PhD students that had babies during their PhDs, that got married. So there's all sorts of life experiences that were going on during those PhDs. And I think one of the key things that I slowly developed, it wasn't something easy, was recognizing that I needed to be a different person to different people, and that one way of supervision was not going to fit everybody.
Mm.
So there are, I don't know whether any of them will listen, but some of them will recognize that I was fairly firm and structured with them. And some of them will think, oh, Claire was easygoing. And when I was having a rubbish day, she told me to go home and take a break. Um, and it's just recognizing that people have different needs, and therefore you need to be receptive and responsive to that as well.
Mm.
Because as you say, you need to get the best out of people. And if they're fighting other things, then they're not in a position to do that. So my key thing is to just try and put people in a position where they can be their best selves, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, it helps you attract the right people to do research with you. And because when I've obviously followed you closely, I thought, what a loss to Leeds, but, good for Sheffield, settled in Sheffield. And we need to talk about where you are in that building because there's a lovely story there too, and I thought, making the time to really embrace the personal side and of the people you work with, and I don't take that for granted because I'm fully aware, how pressurized, an academic's life is and how many priorities you have. And it's very clear to hear from you. For you, that means, yes, my research is incredibly important to me, but so are the people I surround myself with. And whether it's undergraduates you teach, or master students, or PhDs, or your colleagues, or I mean, there's so many you work with. And I think that makes you actually really attractive as a research leader, isn't it? So my guess would be, that you're probably inundated with people who want to work with you.
Yes, yeah, I
Yes.
guess, yes, yeah. I have people keen to work with me. I mean, in the last couple of years, I've developed 3 or 4 additional collaborations on projects that we've actually managed to get funded. Um, One of the things that I've done recently, which took me entirely out of my comfort zone, was a team science camp, which happened last year. So this is a National Institute for Health Research approach. So they brought us together around a topic, and I think there must have been about 100 people in the room, and you had to apply to it. And this was about multiple conditions. And we did an exercise where you had to stand next to people and work out who they were. And I was talking to medical statisticians, nurses, physiotherapists, doctors, various healthcare practitioners, lots of people involved in medical research. And sort of midway through the first day, I realized I was the only engineer in the room. And for a little while, I felt a bit intimidated by that because I felt, oh gosh, what am I doing here? And then when we settled down to sort of talk about projects, I kind of took the engineer outfit off and went, these are the skills, this is what I can do, this is who I am, and discovered that I could make a really valuable contribution to what is a grant that we're about to start next year. So there's a team of 10 of us, and it's amazing to just sort of recognize your personal identity and the skills and what you can bring, rather than just labeling, well, I'm an engineer, I don't
Yeah.
go near humans, or whatever
Yeah.
it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, fascinating. And Claire, tell me more about the building you're in, because I was assuming you're sitting in the Diamond. That's the engineering building I'm familiar with. But I said, no, Ruth, I'm actually not in the Diamond here in Sheffield. Where are you?
So I am in the Pam Liversidge building, which isn't, it's about a 5 minute walk from the Diamond building. But it has a special place for me. So when I was 17-ish, and didn't really know what I wanted to do for a career, I had the fortune of being taken out for lunch by Pam Liversidge, and she introduced me to all these different engineering ideas. Because to be fair, at 16, 17, certainly, because I'm not going to say how old I am, but certainly back then, engineering wasn't necessarily something you thought of in terms of degrees and professions. Engineering was overalls and all that kind of stuff, the
Mm.
stereotypes that we're still trying to fight. So she took me out and sort of said, well, this is kind of problem solving and it's kind of applied science. And she talked me through and really encouraged me to consider engineering broadly, but she also introduced the idea of medical engineering to me. Because my dad's an engineer and my mum, when I was young, was a nurse. So the medical engineering side is very strong in my sort of family roots. And yeah, so it took a couple of years before I ended up on my medical engineering program, but it was very much sort of her introduction that got me thinking
Mm.
about it. So it's really amazing to now be working in a building named after her.
Yeah, it's gone full circle. And isn't it
Yeah.
wonderful that sometimes we have these chance meetings with people and they take the time for us and they gives us space and they encourage us and inspire us. And yeah, and then years later, you're now a professor
Yeah,
in
and
in the profession. Yeah.
and I'd like to think that, I mean, obviously, I have far less interaction with school students, so I don't have that influence. But I really hope that I can have that same impact on someone in terms of enabling them to think about a slightly different career, not necessarily in academia, maybe in sort of a medical technology space, but as an example, one of my undergraduate project students last year came in as a purely mechanical engineer, absolutely loved a biomechanics final year project that I worked with him on. He even got to present it at a conference and he's looking for PhDs in biomechanics now. But the start of last year, he was purely a mechanical engineer and didn't know what
Yeah.
that involved. So,
Yeah.
knowing that you can have that kind of influence just makes me mindful that I need to make sure that that's valuable and I don't diminish the interests in terms of how I talk and approach things, because I want to again hopefully inspire a few people to follow in this space and make that difference.
And I think what strikes me is also, Claire, you're sort of self-reflective and you're value-driven and also you challenge yourself and you're very open about this. And I think that's such an important message to your colleagues and the
Mhm.
students because I think there's still so many people who have these really clear ideas about, what it's like to be an academic and how you get there. And a lot of them seem to have this very linear career path in mind, or that you have to be a super genius to make it, or, and I know you've had your trials and tribulations, any professional, that's not only in
Mhm.
academia, but it's constant, how can I do this better? How can I serve the people I care about? How can I drive my professional interests and how can I collaborate? That's been so obvious about you. And I think otherwise I would have negotiated with the university. I really, really need to finish the 2 years with Claire's program because I'm really committed and I love doing it and I can't let them down. And it was actually not even a negotiation. They said, yeah, okay, get this done,
Excellent.
So, and I'm really pleased because I could bring the program to the end and see what wonderful things people do. And I still get messages from the people from the very first year. So,
Well,
because
that's
when you're on
lovely.
LinkedIn together, and they still say, "Oh my word, back then I learned so much, and look at me now, and you'd be so proud of me." And that's what keeps you and me going because it is more
Absolutely.
work and it does take energy, and it's the way you want to approach it. So, Claire, when you look around and you see academics, they have so many demands on their time. Is there any advice you would give them? Because I really hope that we have listeners who think, wow, that's really inspirational. So I want to sort of up my game a little bit here in terms of how I support the people around me. What do they need to do to stay true to themselves? Any wise words?
So I think one thing is, and it's a challenge, is to give yourself some time. I
Mm,
think so. Certainly during the COVID days where things were challenging, I lost a lot of my creative enthusiasm just because I didn't have the headspace.
mm,
I just was focused on tasks. I was responsive to whatever was coming through on email and chat. And in terms of lifting my head up and looking for the future, that just wasn't happening. I had
mm,
a period of time where I was really bogged down. And I think there's a risk in academia that you can stay in that space, not as negatively, obviously. Um, but if you've got, particularly when a semester starts, if you've got teaching, tutorials, maybe some seminars, then I think it can be easy to fall into a habit of being purely responsive. So you look at your calendar, you do what your calendar tells you, and then you spend the rest of the day replying to the emails. I think the thing that has been really important to me in the last couple of years, and I mean, obviously not everyone can move place, but actually the move to Sheffield enabled me to reset some of my boundaries, um, is sort of defining some boundaries. I think workload is always a problem for academics, but I think the thing there is to negotiate. So if something is eating into your time, then it's something to flag. So, as a good example, I block in my diary some time where students can drop in, and that can be students from first year undergrad through to postgraduates, and they know that there's a couple of hours that they can just drop in. I'm happy sitting doing my emails and sort of getting on with stuff. So if no one comes, then that's fine. But it means that I'm having constructive discussions and meaningful time where people know that I'm actually giving them time on my terms. So it isn't someone popping their head around the door. So that was something I did get wrong early doors in the CDT, was that I would just let people come into my office and into my space at any time. So I was busy writing a paper, they knocked the door, and I would say, "Oh, come in, let's have a chat." Um, it's important to have the chat, but it needs to be in time that you've got. I think I, for a while, kind of compromised and then got myself very stressed by having that. Um, and then the other thing is that if you do have to compromise your time, so someone puts something in your diary, um, teaching or what have you, make sure you get that back. I used to, like when I was trying to write a grant or something, have some time blocked aside for thinking about it. And then I'd go, oh, well, that's just for me. That doesn't matter. If I don't submit that fellowship, it only affects me. And so I'll go and do all these other things that are helping other people. Now that's lovely, but you have to have that balance. You can't go too far the other way and
yeah,
spend all your time. But this is the other point where I find it's really important to put some boundaries is email,
mm,
because people will email you when they want to, obviously. And the reward center in your brain, if you're replying to them and helping them out, goes ding, and you feel really happy by doing that. But what you're then sort of putting off is the grant writing, the paper writing, all the things that
mm.
you have to do to be a good academic. And I think the balance there is really important. And I certainly recognize it in myself where I'm having a bad day. And so solving other people's problems suits me rather than going, could you try that yourself and come back to me? Because I think that's the other boundary is if you are perceived as nice, then
Mm.
there
You
is
get
a
more
dis
demands.
that you get more
Yeah,
demands, but also from a sort of interaction point of view, people will expect you to help
yeah,
and expect you to help more than you should. So where like I don't know, I can't think of an example at the moment. Oh, one of my undergrads the other week said, "Oh, Claire, I can't find this. What's this? Can you explain it to me?" And it's all available on Blackboard for them. So 2 minutes on Blackboard. To be honest, I didn't respond immediately. I saw it come in, had other stuff. And then sort of several hours later, oh, I found it. It's okay. And it's
yeah.
like, well, actually, that should be you learning and you supporting yourself. So it's really important to be helpful, be approachable, be supportive, but also recognize that you can't do everything for everyone,
Mm,
and that's not what you should be doing either.
mm.
And I think that took me a little while to recognize, because I was just like, oh, I need to help them, and it's like that's actually not helping.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I for a while thought that people would think less of me and think I was mean or horrible, and no one does, because people recognize that I am making time, I am supportive, I do care, and I just don't have endless amounts of time to do things. So it's
And
that
nor should
balance.
you.
Well, no.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think, it's also about, I mean, I see this in my work, it's about setting expectations, because I
Yeah.
know, yes, I can help and I'm as helpful as I want to be and can be. But there are moments when I think, no, you need to learn this yourself, because
Yeah.
you won't have a Claire or Ruth around you forever, and it also gives them the chance to realize, oh, I can actually do that. I don't
Yeah.
actually need Ruth Winnan to comment on my LinkedIn profile or my CV
Hmm.
or help me find the next step or so. And what strikes me, Claire, is it's a learning process. And what I love about your story so much is you're so open about, yeah, I didn't I don't always get it right, but I'm learning from it. And
Mm,
that's the path of any professional, isn't it? We will get better and better and
absolutely.
learn from it. And that's also really good role modeling for those you work with. We could be chatting forever.
We could.
And it was because we have so much to chat about, but I'm very conscious. I mean, you've given us so much of your time, and I'm very clear on professional boundaries. Also, you've given us some really good food for thought, and it's
Thank
so
you.
lovely to see you. And yes, we're both based in Sheffield, so I do hope we will also manage to get a coffee at some point.
Definitely.
But for today, thank you so much, Claire. It's been really enlightening, and
Thank you.
just keep being you,
Thank you.
and never forget what an impact you make on all of us. And all the best. You take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss out on our brand new episodes. And if you're enjoying the discussions, give us some love by dropping a 5-star rating and written review, as it helps other research culturists find us. And please share with a friend and show them how to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and here's to you and your research culture.